everybody, welcome to the Geek Vault. It's your boy Dre. This is the entrance to some of my older content videos. So if you're seeing this, thank you for watching the video. Thumbs up, thumbs down if you don't like it, thumbs up if you love it. Comment below. Let me know what you think. Subscribe to the channel so you can see more of new content, old content, whatever content in the middle. But in any event, I just wanted to have this video kind of go out there. So if you see in the video, like, why does it say Dre's Geek Depot, or it says Toy Chats, or the Geek Dad, or the Nerd Dungeon? These are older videos that I did years ago, last year, or a few months ago, and I wanted to rebrand them under this channel, but it would be a lot of work just to re-edit everything out. So I'm just editing this video in so you guys can see, hey, it's me, and it's the Geek Depot, or not the Geek Depot, duh. It's the Geek Vault. And eventually, like I said, when I started this channel, if you watch that first video, it tells you what I was doing about rebranding. But eventually, at some point, I'll make a video explaining the whole thing. So thank you for coming, for watching this video, and I hope you enjoy the content. Stay geeky, y'all. Peace.
Saunders, and this is my first time presenting this kind of panel at this kind of, I guess, convention. I'm used to going as a nerd to comic book conventions and talking about stuff like this because I've been a lifelong fan of comic books. And I got inspired by doing this sort of stuff when I was living in New York, working in after school programs. I worked in several different ones. And mostly I was working with kids that, either couldn't read from like 3rd, 4th grade, all the way up to high school. And the one common thing I always saw with them that I knew that they loved was pop culture and comic books. It was always something that was a driving force for them. So when you're in an after-school program, I couldn't do a whole lot. Mostly was a mentor. That was when I was in New York. Virginia, the same thing. After years, I finally moved down to Charlotte, and I was a late bloomer. 40s, for me, turning 40 this year is kind of becoming 21 again. So I kind of was like, I got to get myself into a career, and I got into education full steam. And I started teaching. I was a sub. And as a sub, I liked to have fun in my classroom. I'd play games, like Jeopardy, Pictionary, and my kids loved it. But I knew that those things got stale. So I was like, all right, well, what am I going to do that's going to spruce this up? What can I do that gets them interested in what I'm talking about, that keeps me on course with what I have to do with the unpacking documents, as well as with the standards, not only interesting to me, but interesting to them, and make it relevant to them. Because we all know as teachers, you look at an unpacking document, you look at the curricula, and it's very dry. It doesn't really tell you a whole lot to do, and you have to go look for your own resources. I'm finding ways to make it interesting and fun. So I went to what I know, which is comic books, video games, pop culture. And since I love that sort of stuff, I said, well, these kids love this stuff too. And they are way more experts at it than we are. Now, I've had people tell me, well, my coworkers will be like, well, I'm 50, I'm 40, I'm 60, I'm not really into that sort of stuff. Doesn't matter. You got Wikipedia, you got Google. Let them guide the classroom. I had to learn 2 years ago. Give them the keys, they'll drive the bus. All I gotta do is know how to get the hand on the wheel every now and then. And that changed how I was doing things in my classroom. So, one of the things I do, like I said, I have a YouTube show, and it's mostly about geek, sundry, and culture. And one thing I always do, my kids have seen a couple episodes, which I was praying to God they never find it, but they did. Yeah, they got the internet. These kids, they're not that savvy. Of course they are. They found my show, and they said, Mr. Saunders, we want to start doing top 5 lists like you do in the class, like on your show. I said, oh Lord, you guys saw my show. Man, that's bad. Like, all right, so you guys see the show, and then I'm like, oh, top 5 lists, all right. So I do it like Johnny Carson used to do it, like Letterman used to do it. You have like those top 5 lists, and I would take relevant topics we're talking about in the classroom and make it relevant. So this way, to make this easier and relatable for you guys, I created a top 5 list for this panel. Like I said, if you guys want, it's on the share drive right now, and I hate being at a podium, so if you see me walking around, that's where I like to be. I do not like standing behind this to be like, hello, this doesn't work for me. So, number 5. Make ideas more relatable for them to understand. what that means. It's a challenge, like I just said, for us to make those unpacking documents, taking a topic like civil rights, which to me is an awesome topic. And for most of these kids, where we teach is a predominantly minority school in a low-income area. So we always, when you mention civil rights, these kids are hungry to talk about it. But they don't know how the right arena to bring up the topic. So if you could find something that's a way to draw them in, you can, and it's easy. Like, for example, Civil War, the Marvel comic book, came out like around, I was saying 2005. Now, you don't have to know this stuff. You can pick it up and read it. But these kids were able to take some concepts out of this and relate it to what I had to talk about. Not just civil rights, but I'm going to go further back to when I had to talk about something about the concept of Democrats and Republicans. Now, this Civil War book is about Captain America versus Iron Man. Now, if you saw the movie, which I played scenes from the movie, and the kids are watching it because the kids have been like, oh, I've seen all the movies. I was like, great, but I want you to read this. Because there was some moving stuff in this book that was different than the movie. In this, there was an accident. Kids get blown up on a school bus. Superheroes are blamed. Government wants to police them. Kids are like, well, they do that now when we have terrorist bombings in other countries. I'm like, exactly. There's my point that I got you. I hooked you. Now I gotta reel you in. So then I'm like, all right, Democrats, Republicans, guys, what's the difference? I said, let's do a T-chart. And I said, well, who likes Captain America? So me, of course, I have not a shortage of geeky T-shirts. Put one on one side, Captain America. One on the other side, Iron Man. I said, all right, pick your sides. They did, they gravitated to their sides. I said, now explain to me how each one fits into that category. They knew what the definition of a Republican was. They knew the definition of a Democrat. And then they listed traits. And then I said, now go on your Chromebooks and look up traits of Captain America, traits of Iron Man, and relate that to the definition. They did that, and they killed it. I had one student that came to me, a little Spanish girl. She said, Mr. Saunders, I don't like talking about stuff like this. I don't know anything. I said, don't worry about it. I don't know what I'm talking about either. She laughed, and when she got comfortable, she ended up being one of the things, which I'm actually going to put on that drive, the best example of the work I did. She did it. She put together the best presentation I've ever seen. For someone who knew nothing about the material and just had the base knowledge of the notes of a Democrat and Republican, put together probably the awesomest presentation I've seen, and I gave her the best grade in the class, guys. I couldn't believe it. Now that girl, I told her, I said, I'm going to show this when I'm going. So other teachers are going to see this, and she's like, oh no. I said, don't worry. I said, your work is something that I think is other teachers need to see. Because I can write the rubric, I can write the whole thing, but seeing it from a student's perspective, it's awesome. That's on the shared drive too. Now, number 4. Obviously, use of popular culture in the classroom as a conversation starter. Our school loves to have us do warm-ups. Most people do warm-ups. We do exit tickets too. I always like to try to do it as an exit ticket because these kids at the end of the class, in that last 5-10 minutes, they got like ants in their pants. They're ready to go. Oh, I gotta go to the bathroom. No, I can't. No. I gotta do this. No. I find something. We'll take a news topic. We'll take something in sports. Couple months ago, there was Vegas. Anybody hear about that whole thing with Vegas? That they had the Spartan logo. The U.S. military decided to sue the Vegas hockey team, and they're on their best season ever. So I have a ton of athletes in my class. They were like, Mr. Saunders, I got an opinion about that. I said, oh, really? I don't. So tell me yours. And it became a whole heated discussion about why does the military have the right to come in and sue a hockey team? Does the government have that right? Why are they doing this? What's the point of this concept of the logo? Trademarking. I mean, it blew up other topics that I don't really talk about, but it created and showed me an interest and it got them interested in topics in the news. And this is several things. We talked about stuff going on with the water shortage in South Africa. They've been seeing that, and they're now talking about conservation. They want to actually get together and see if we can send them water. I mean, these kids are now becoming interested in seeing how not just pop culture, like in music, movies, television, whatever, they're seeing it in the news, and I expose it to them. every weekend, I know I get like kind of slapped on the wrist by my administration about it, but they know me. I'm kind of like the one that likes to go left when they tell me to go right. And I like showing them the student news every week. Why? You need to be literate. These kids need to be educated and need to know. I did it with 6th grade last year when I taught, and I do it now with 8th grade. And the difference with 8th grade, I can have a higher level conversation, and they're able to carry the conversation outside of me. They will start their own conversations in their group topics and be able to pull things from the news that I'm not even thinking about. Which, when in 6th grade, I had to guide it a little bit better. Like, we always call our 6th graders babies. We're like, oh, yeah, they're little babies. He teaches 7th grade, and I do 8th grade. Now, with 8th grade, I was like, all right, this is going to be fun. I can have them carry the conversation for me. Again, I let the keys over, and they were driving me around. They were like, well, we talked about slavery, and we're talking about this, and we're talking about that. And then they dragged me into the conversation. And now I'm sitting at the table with them and hearing other people looking to get my attention because their conversations are not just getting heated, they're asking for insight, they're asking for more information, they're looking it up. They're taking the reins to go and do the research, which I think was fun. So this is now not just the pop culture and the stuff I'm doing, it's showing that it can work. Now, this should bring me to number 3. Increase student literacy. That's been the thing last year when we were here. They talked about it, went to several great talks about it. And if you guys have friends in ELA, if you're not friends with them, buddy up with them. I was talking to somebody just recently about The Great Gatsby, and I knew that Great Gatsby would cover the Roaring 20s, Great Depression time. Kids get to see the rich, they see how people interact, social classes, all these inventions, things that they had never got to really care about. And I was like, well, The Great Gatsby, 1974? Now our coworker, my teammate on 8th grade, he's very different than me. He's very old school, loves to get at the pulpit and lecture. I can't. So I sat there and I'm like, man, 1974, Robert Redford. I'm like, I know who this guy is, but are these kids gonna find the relevance? Are they gonna get it? Man, I had kids that don't like to read a book glued to the screen, like, oh no, Daisy's getting killed, what's gonna happen next? No, I, by accident, hit something on my screen and it pulled up like my notes. They screamed at me to rewind the screen. They were like, I'd never seen something where I had little faith in them, really more myself, thinking that I was like, man, they're not gonna get this. But they did. They were catching character development, concepts of socialism. They were catching government things. They were catching the wartime issues. Everything we talked about in class, they picked up on. And then when I was like, okay, well, let's explain the relationship to Gatsby, which I know that's ELA. I was stepping on people's toes. Again, that's just me. I'm a habitual stone temper. That's what I do. And I was like, wow, this is great. I'm seeing you guys see this, and they're able to now write about it. And I always want them to be literate. I tell them, I said, look, I liked to read when I was younger. I like to read now. There was a point in college I stopped reading. And they understood because when I said I hit 18, it was all about parties. It was all about doing things I wasn't supposed to be doing. But when I got to wanting to read again, it increases my vocabulary, it increases my intelligence. And when I made it available to them to say that you guys are already smart, these vocab words just trip you up. And I give them the definition, it makes it easier for them. And it makes it fun. Because if they think it's easy, and they think it's fun, the learning's already happening. So you're already, it's like, it's already going on. They're already participating and wanting to stay a part of it. Oh, if you guys have any questions, feel free to interrupt me, because I know I like to talk, but I like to hear myself talk sometimes. All right. Number 2, now on this imagery he recommended it last night because I didn't realize the slide was empty. Thank you for letting me know that. So he's like, well, he does in his class, he puts pictures up for his PowerPoints. So I had on there a picture of Darth Vader, Super Mario from Mario Brothers, Kendrick Lamar, and Steph Curry. Now number 2 is titled, Have Students Draw from What Interests Them. Now I know what interests me. If you put a picture of Batman up there, you put a PlayStation logo up there, that would get me in a second. But these kids, I don't listen to their music. So I had to ask him, he's younger than me, I said, hey, what do they listen to? He's like, oh, some guy, Little Yachty. Yeah. I looked at the picture, I was like, oh no, I can't put that on a PowerPoint. I said, not for y'all. That guy is cool. So I said, Kendrick Lamar? He's like, yeah, go ahead. So I said, these were images that if you could do that, to create those conversation starters in your classroom, be like, hey, what's going on in the world with this person? I hate to even say it, these kids are more up to date on pop culture than they are on relevant things that they should be paying attention to. But if it promotes literacy in your classroom, by hook or by crook, get it done. That's how I've been doing it. It's sneaky, but again, it works because it catches their interest. With my athletes, they all want to talk about Super Bowl. I was like, come on guys, I really don't want to hear about the Super Bowl. But one kid convinced me. He said, Mr. Saunders, what about the riots? Why are the cops not going after people rioting? I was like, well, that's not a bad topic. Can you make it, sell me on it? I always tell them, if you can sell me on the topic, I'll let you write it. I'm pretty, if you want to get a good grade, if it's a kid that I know that won't write, but if he found that he's gonna write a whole lot about it, man, he was like, well, it's, you notice all in the videos, it's, you know, he's an African-American student, he's like, oh, it's all these white people. I'm like, dude, don't go at it like when you write like that, please don't. I said, learn how to properly articulate what you want to say. So he's like, these are people that are fans. I said, dude, it couldn't matter what color the fans were. Fans riot, look what the cops are doing. They're putting Crisco on poles. Why are they doing this? People get hurt. And he started, then he's like, wait a second, it's not color. It's this. And he blew up, probably for the first time I've read something he wrote, rather well. Rather articulated nicely different points that I didn't even see. And all about something that I didn't want them to write about, which is Super Bowl. Made it relevant to him. Now, I want to take a second in this, because for me, with your people that are low readers, that do not speak English, Newsella has articles all over the place. I speak Spanish in my school. I'm one of, Nick, isn't it like 4 of us?
Yes.
I'm one of 4 people in my whole school, and we predominantly have a lot of Spanish people. So I can speak to them, but they may not be literate in the language. So I try by gauging them with articles in Spanish, and I try to find topics that are relevant. Now sadly, Newsella I felt was a little skewed, because a lot of the topics were about Trump, immigration, you know, what's life in Mexico. I was like, well, no, I want articles in Spanish about what's going on in the US. Now you'll find that through CNN Student News. If you look at CNN 10, you can go through there and they have some great resources there that you can pull up, and they actually do put it in Spanish. All you gotta do for those kids that don't speak English, there's an En Español button on the bottom. If you use Chrome, there's an extension that'll translate to Spanish. And usually you can get help from your ESL person to do that for you, or any of your media specialists. A lot of them actually do. I've been picking the brain of ours for a while, and she's been helping me a lot, finding me great resources, because I can find stuff, but again, if you don't read the language, pictures can help, but they sometimes need an article. Now for the ones that are interested but don't like to write, I go to stuff like this. We were talking about slave trade, Civil War. This is written by a historian. Didn't even know that it was a historian, so I did a little research. Now it's fictional, but it takes place during the right during the Civil War. It's a guy who's a slave, who is an actual famous slave in history, who had his hand chopped off and he was replaced because I think it was Franklin put a gun on his hand, so they called him Pistol Fist. He wore a mask and was going around. He had a Native American female. I was like, this is great. This is what I want my kids to see, because they're seeing not just a superhero, they're seeing a little bit of history. Yeah, it's fictionalized, but it got my kids interested. They're like, well, what's he doing? What? I'm like, here you go, take a look. I photocopy. Sometimes you can't afford to get more than one book. Sometimes they don't have more than one book. So I'd print copies out for my kids. I made a class set, and they would look at them, and I had them analyze what we're reading. What do you see as a commonality we're talking about with the Civil War? What do you see with the slave trade? Do you see this? What's his purpose of wearing the mask? Is it he wearing the mask for this? And I had several great conversations just coming out of one book. Cost me $10. Probably the best resource I had. There's another one there's several up here, you guys can take a look at them. I have one about World War II letters. It's actual graphic novel. Yes, sir?
What's that book called?
This one here?
The one you were just on.
That's called Pistol Fist. Amazon had it. It's an independent publisher. There's several good ones. Actually, now that you got me, I'll pull this one up too. There's another good one that this goes across curricula. This actually, a guy on Twitter I follow named Tim, he does this panel, like this is his kind of baby. And when I told him, I said I wanted to do it in North Carolina, because he lives in Pittsburgh, he's like, bless your heart, go ahead and do it. So I was like, yes. This is one of the books he recommended. Group of teachers got together with a comic book publishing company, and they covered several different areas. So you got math, science, English, physics, chemistry, history, And it's small, the excerpts are not really big, but you could use them in your classroom to make jokes about how the pyramids were built, or how to explain the Pythagorean theorem, or how to explain sentence structure, or how, rain is formed. They have very cool little things in here. You can photocopy them, make your own little questions about it, have them look at it. For any level of reader, it's fun. And like I said, this is one I recommended to a couple people on his team, and they bought it the same day. This one runs you about $20, and the money actually goes to a foundation that's for teachers to actually do more books on curricula. So again, at the end of this, if you guys want to come up here and take a look at this stuff, you guys can. Now, the number one reason why we all kind of do what we do. Of course, my laptop's giving me a technical issue. Give me 1 second. We're teachers, you know how this works. All right. Now, this is the hardest one, and it's going to go back to what I was saying before. Draw from what you find interesting. Again, I know what I like. I know what I'm interested in. But a lot of the times, you see people that get afraid to kind of show what they like. Coaches, I've noticed, for example, anybody coach any sports in here? It's easy for you to talk to your kids about sports, right? You go in there and you start talking about that game you saw on TV or a game you guys just had, and it's easy conversation. You can bridge that gap. You start going to kids that like Harry Potter, or that like any kind of fancy like Game of Thrones. You shouldn't be watching that, but they read the books, Or if they read graphic novels like Walking Dead, or into Star Wars, or into any of that stuff, it becomes this alien territory that people suddenly get uneasy. Trust me, as an adult, I've run into it several times. And people look at my classroom, they're like, "Are you like 12? I'm like, I don't care. The kids love my classroom, the kids love me. So I must be doing something right. But if you can actually find a way to bridge that gap of your own personal fear, and not feel afraid of what you're going to say or what you're doing, what you love, they see that and they latch onto it. I've had kids bring me stuff. They'll bring comic books to me and say, hey, we could use this. For example, we talked about imperialism briefly, and they brought me a Star Wars comic book about stormtroopers, and they were talking about these stormtroopers were arguing with Vader about invading a particular territory. And they were like, Mr. Saunders, this is a perfect example of imperialism. First off, my eyes bugged out of my head. The kid was able to even say that to me. But then he backed it up with evidence. I'm like, wow, like this is cool. And you see this stuff, and it's like, all right. And he knew I'm not a Star Wars fan. I'm a Star Trek fan. But he was able to kind of feel that he was comfortable enough to come up to me and say that. I've had kids come up and talk to me about ideas and other things that I like. Like why is vigilantism something we should talk about? Because there was an issue in... somebody on CNN Student News saw that this guy in Thailand had a boombox. Now they know Thailand is a third world country. They're like, oh my God. This guy got attacked by a vigilante and killed, and the cops didn't do anything about it. So they brought up the concept of vigilantism to me. And then they're like, well, Mr. Saunders, I watch Arrow, and he's on TV, and he's doing this, and I talk about Batman, and you love Batman. And I'm like, yeah, I love all this stuff. So I said, make the connection for me. So if that guy in Thailand doesn't get arrested, did he do something right? Is he a criminal? And they're like, I don't know. I said, well, how many people, thumbs up, if you guys think he's a criminal? You get a couple. They're the yes people for me. I get like instantly, what? We're supposed to say yes because you asked me a question. We all know those kids. Then you got the ones that are like, I'm like, all right, let me get the ones in the middle. I got a couple in the middle. Those are the ones I know that want to answer, but they're not confident enough to answer. And there's the ones that are really bold and just want to get the rise out of me. And a couple of those are the no's. They're just like, nah. When I got the yes, and I go, well, somebody from the yes, somebody from the no, somebody from the middle. I selected randomly, cold call them. Said, stand up, and they stood up at their seats. And I said, defend why you should be a vigilante. Well, sometimes you got to take the law into your own hands, look what happens. And then they recanted me with tales from their own life. They're starting to tell me things that they see in the neighborhood, maybe somebody they knew. Like, well, my uncle was doing something good, and he was defending somebody, but he got shot because of a crossfire. And that's not right. The cops were there, this would have happened. If somebody came in like Batman, it would have been dealt with. And I'm like, wow, now you're bridging something even more. I'm building a relationship with you on a personal level. You're feeling comfortable enough in my class to share with me. and you're keeping it on task and on something relevant. And that's what these kids want to see in social studies. I can talk to you your ear off about World War II. I can talk to you about civil rights. I can talk to you about women's rights. And now that I have a lot of girls in my class, which is very different for me, because they all want to talk about women's rights and women's voting. After watching Great Gatsby, these women are like, no, you won't ever slap me. So it's a lot of fun, and they're like hyped to ready to talk about it next week. So again, if you find that hook, all you gotta do is find that hook in your classroom that you like, and while you're passionate about what you like doing, they'll see it, and they'll jump onto it. Like I said, Great Gatsby, I had zero confidence in that. They jumped in. I could say, well, whose relationship is with this one? Who was tied to this one? Why is this happening? And they were telling me every story. Why was going on? What about this car? They were looking research to find out when the first Rolls Royce was made, because that was Gatsby's car. These kids took an interest on such a deeper level that it was more impressive to me to see them catch it in my classroom than to see them actually just sit there and just be a mouth breather. So I don't like being a babysitter in the classroom. And I told them, I said, there's no free rides in Saunders' class. I said, I want you to work. And they know. I love them to death. I'll sit there and crack jokes with you. We can talk comic books all day, but you got to produce. I have artwork in my classroom. All last year, in 6th grade, I had a whole room just full of artwork, because they would take period pieces. Actually, if I had the chance to put it up on the LCD projector, one of my students took apart Daisy. Now, if you guys saw The Great Gatsby in '74, Daisy was one of the female characters that kind of ruins the relationships for everybody else. But she was Gatsby's true love. So one girl who's an artist in my class, she's very quiet, but she's opinionated. And will come talk to me and talk my ear off. Mr. Saunders, I gotta talk. I'm like, oh, I love you, Gatsby. We talk later. But she came in yesterday at the end of the day, before I was coming here, and said, hey, I want to show you something. She took a picture of Daisy and drew her like a zombie. Like the eye was missing, the skin was all here. I said, well, could you explain why? I said, it's beautiful artwork. I said, could you explain to me why you're drawing that? She said, well, she's ugly on the inside. And then she starts pulling examples. She's like, Mr. Saunders, she tears apart Gatsby. She won't be with him because of her social status, all because of money. Because back then, if women did, she said, rich girls don't marry poor boys. He's quoting the movie to me. And I'm like, ooh, all right, I'm doing my job right. I'll take that down the back. But I'm seeing her do this, and then other students are coming around, and they're like, wow, that looks awesome. She really is and now I'm seeing it spawn from there. Just the image alone was enough to get them to start talking. And this is at the end of the day. We're not on class time. This is waiting for the bus to go home. And for the rest of that 10 minutes waiting for the bus, they're talking about that artwork and that whole situation. That, to me, is a sign that I was able to hand them the keys over, and they were able to do it. Now, there are 3 activities I have that I'm not going to have you guys do them, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about them so you guys can do them in your classroom. The Captain America, Iron Man one. Again, you don't have to know who they are. If you've watched the movies, you kind of get a gist of who they are, but Wikipedia is your friend. If not, there's always a nerd hiding in your midst, folks. There's always one, trust me. I think on every grade level, we at least have 1 or 2 that hide. And, if you guys find that person, be like, hey, I know it's a little embarrassing. I don't know anything about Captain America. I don't want to go on Wikipedia. Can you tell me a little bit about him? I don't know about Iron Man. Can you tell me a little bit about him? And the kids, because they'll know. But when you're creating the exercise, pull up, key ideas on each one. Not just, who they are name-wise. Don't go through that much backstory. Just find concepts. Captain America, he represents patriotism during World War II. He was fighting the Nazis. You can pull up comic book covers. If you want to even go as far as put posters, if you're teaching U.S. history, you can buy the posters at Target for $7. Put them on your wall. They show. And you can use it as a form of explaining how journalism was skewed in America's favor to create that rise of patriotism. If you happen to be into Asian culture, Japanese comic books were the first version of Japanese people talking bad about the American bombings and American culture during World War II. Kids are interested in that sort of stuff. If you can find them old, what they call Japanese manga or Japanese comics, you can find them online, images, they'll show it. And some people have translated the actual things. I read Japanese and speak Japanese, so that's easy for me. But if you don't speak another language, there's great resources out there for you. Now, while you're doing that exercise, you create that T-chart for Democrat, Republican, go dig further down. You can go and say, well, explain, liberal and conservative. And you'll see the kids start forming those connections. Now, guys, you can take that and do that with pretty much anything, though. That was the example I did with Captain America and Iron Man. And if it wasn't for him, this idea wouldn't even hit. We do civil rights. Most everybody does U.S. history either in high school and in 8th grade. I know they touch on it in 7th grade a little bit. Magneto and Xavier, the two characters of the X-Men, are representative of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. Now, last night, we were actually going to have a little thing to test you, to have a speech that Magneto says about mutants needing their right to be, be homo superior, because that's what their classification was. And then you listen to the by any means necessary speech that Malcolm X says, and you can pick up on lines that they're just exactly why they're modeled after each other. And I didn't even think to go that way, but he introduced me to that idea because I liked it. Please, sir.
Yeah. Hi. I work with Andre at East Union in Marshville. I've been teaching for like 3 years, so I'm fairly new to this. But when we were talking about comic books and graphic novels, growing up, I watched the X-Men, the animated series, so that was like close to me. And I knew about Magneto, and I knew about Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And in 7th grade, we do touch on civil rights. And when he was discussing about comic books, it was a one-to-one connection for literacy ELA people, pulling those speeches and having them guess who said it and putting pictures with it. My kids like that activity, putting like little bubbles and having images with it. Real simple things. With Magneto, when we were pulling up the videos, it's great for my visual learners to be able to see what he's actually referring to and to see, because we've always had like the civil rights, black and white stuff with the more heavy stuff when we get into Jim Crow, but putting up Magneto and just a simple and then bringing it back to Jim Crow, real one-to-one connection. Yeah, just a simple little exercise.
It's like 20 seconds. We actually found it. It's 10 seconds and 20 seconds.
Yes.
So I'm going to hope that this being by the microphone's not going to be too loud. I'll move it. Of course, I had the volume off.
I believe that mutants and normal humans cannot live together in peace. The war for survival must begin now, while we mutants are strong and you are still divided.
Now, this is Magneto talking to a senator who he kidnapped. So you can already draw imagery, say, what are you guys seeing in this video? What are you guys picking up from this clip? And then let them analyze it, give them like 5-10 minutes to kind of come up with their own questions and what they picked up from it. And then you play this one.
We declare our right on this earth to be a man, to be a human being, to be respected as a human being, to be given the rights of a human being in this society, on this earth, in this day, which we intend to bring into existence by any means necessary.
Now, for most of your kids that are into this sort of stuff, they will gobble it up. But it gives them a chance to hit on some critical thinking, which is one of the big things I always want my 8th graders going into high school with. I don't like a kid just sitting there in the classroom just kind of like, oh, I see this. I tell them, always dig deeper. Look past the surface. Tell me what you see. I said, look, I can look at it like a little baby pool, but I want the ocean. And I said, we still got to walk steps through the sand before I get past that where it's dark water. So I try to graduate them through those steps. So what do you see in that one? What did you guys hear? What do you guys pick up? And then when I question them on that, what do you think he's feeling? What do you think Magneto thinks? And then when I would play that one to hear them, I'd say, now you're hearing Malcolm X speak. What do you guys think about that? And that's the way I can see, one, that they're getting it, and two, that it's hitting on, like he said, it's hitting on several things within the standards that they need to get. And those are just two examples that we had pulled up. Now, there's several other ones that you could use that, like I've done with, like I said, the Civil War, and when I was talking about the Civil War, because I talked about separation of people, when people secede, how the government steps in. There's several opportunities and ways of doing things that you can have fun with. Now, the graphic novels that I've listed there, some of them, again, for when you talk about U.S. history, I know, again, this kind of tell them a little bit. I love Asian history. My degree and my master's, I spent time studying in Asia, hence why I speak Japanese. And I love that sort of stuff, but when it came to 8th grade, I was like, oh wow, I know what 8th grade teaches, and they hand me the book, and it's like, oh, United States history? Wow, the thing I spent all the time in college avoiding. So, you know, I had to like come up with ways that I could find it interesting. And for visual learners, the Constitution is a very heavy document. We as adults sit and have to muddle through some of it and get it. Graphic visualization. And it is some of the coolest stuff. They explain and have pictures and they break down the different amendments. And you can explain it. I printed some of these out, photocopied them, and then we would analyze them while I was doing Civil War so they could see the Constitution visually. And then I had on the smart board the actual amendment written out, like the legalese version of it. Because some kids, your AIG kids will want to get the legalese because they want to memorize it for the test. Everybody else will want to see the visual because they'll get it better. They'll remember an image. And we do. People will always remember something very visceral or very positive based on the imagery you see. We were talking about lynching and when you do civil rights, about how in different, like, we would never think it'd be something bad to show in your classroom. Like if I showed a scene of Spawn, which if anybody knows Spawn's comic book, he was a black superhero that was sent to hell. And one comic book Todd McFarlane drew, it got him a lot of negative feedback in the news. Because he had Spawn lynched by the KKK. And the cover literally had the character dangling from a tree. In the 90s, that was taboo. And I had a student bring that up to me recently saying, are we going to talk about that? I said, of course we will. Because I wanted his opinion. So what did you think about it, just to get him one-on-one? He's like, well, I know that's kind of like, we shouldn't be talking about this. No, we can. Because I want to make, and I think every classroom should be, a safe place. My kids know, you can talk to me. I don't like them cussing, but we all know that they say far worse things that make us blush. And I say, if you guys can feel safe and you're talking to me about a topic that you think is a little bit, like, much, this is the safe place to talk about it. Yeah, I can, if I feel it's a little too much, I will send a letter home before, the week before, so that way I can get parents, because I'm a parent too of a 12-year-old son, and I wouldn't mind if the teacher sent me a letter home saying, hey, you know, we're going to talk about this, all right. Again, some parents are very open and are very willing to have those kind of conversations about lynching, about what it is to be going through racism, because some people have a very personal connection to it. You know, as a minority male who grew up in New York most of my life, my adult life anyway, you learn to go through it. And it's not something positive, but I don't always share all my experiences, but I share with them some. And I know how to properly temper it. And when I temper it with the wisdom of being older, not with how I reacted when I was younger. And I think that that's in an age now where it is something in the news. These kids feel some kind of way about Trump, whether you support him or you don't. My kids always have an opinion, and I try to keep mine out. And that's the one thing administration is very, very keen on. The first thing they say, if it's a controversial topic, keep yourself out of it. And it's true. We've talked about everything in the news. Like I said, I do current events every week. And one thing they'll find, always something about sex. There was a big topic about a 26-year-old guy met a girl on the internet. This is something that happens. These kids are on the internet. He meets this girl in France, takes her, sleeps with her in the stairwell of his house. She goes back home. Parents file charges against the 26-year-old. Now, the kids are like, well, internationally, does that change, Mr. Saunders? I said, well, in the international court system, it's a whole lot of different mess, but things are very different over in Europe than they are here. And they were like, well, here, he'd get arrested, right? I said, well, the French police said that she consented. So the kids are now bringing up topics of understanding consent. They're looking up the state level of consent, because some kids in our classrooms in 8th grade are 14, 15, 13. These are things that they're exposed to. And as much as I'm a parent who would love my 12-year-old son to be like me, play with the G.I. Joes, just ignore the rest of the world out there, but I can't. And I know that it exists. And when you make it a comfortable topic, where it's easily broachable, they will open up to you and really give you some great insights. Because you'll hear, I had girls saying, if that was my sister, if that was my daughter, if that was my cousin, you know, I'd feel this kind of way. And they said, well, if it was me, I wouldn't have done that because of my parents, my upbringing. You start making, again, those personal connections, which I think as teachers, we get 100-something kids through the year. And you can't connect with every single one. But those times you get that one connection, and it was one, I'll even recant, I'll tell you a little story about this. Great Gatsby. And this is one I feel like recently because we've done it. When Myrtle gets slapped, when Gatsby, she comes out screaming, the whole thing about, I can say anything I want, Daisy, 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 and he reels back and slaps the taste out of her mouth. Every single kid in that class was just, you see their heads just go back. So I paused it and I said, in the 1920s, rights like this were not something that were acceptable, because they were like, well, nobody at the party's reacting. I said, yeah. And then, of course, you always got to boomerang it back to them. I said, I see y'all in the cafeteria. Why don't y'all just start wagging your finger in the class? And why did you say that? And 12 of you just jumped into one kid. And they start laughing, and they all start looking because they know who I'm talking about without pointing fingers. But then I said, back then, people were very private. As much as you could be at a party, social status was everything. No matter how much money you had, you could act that way. And they're like, well, that's not right. So girls were starting to hear, some girls shared some stories with me personally that actually hurt my heart, because I have sisters. And it's like, wow, like these are stories, they're like, well, I don't feel this is right. And when they wrote about it, like just as a reflection at the end of class, they're really giving you some insights on how they think and what the material, and it touches them. And for me, that creates not just that memory block for them, it gives you that chance to really open up with them and have that, again, that one-on-one, or as a group. So yeah, like, I may not know a lot about pop culture. I may not know a lot about sports. I may not know a lot about a lot of things. But if you become a jack of all trades in your classroom, the Swiss Army knife teacher, you're awesome. Like I said, if you know a little bit about graphic novels, you don't have to know a whole lot. But if you catch something that they're interested in, Black Panther is right now the hottest thing in the market. I got interested because it's right now Black History Month. Did not know the artist was a black man. Black man that had a job as a bus driver, a chef, eventually was a graffiti artist, took his artwork to Stan Lee at Marvel in 1960s. Now you're looking at the height of civil rights. You're looking at so many topics. This guy walks in there and gets his book published and now is a multi-millionaire. My students that are artists that are minorities, I tell them, look at the success story right there. This guy was a bus driver, did not know what he wanted to do with his life. Look what he's doing. You can talk about Rosa Parks. We can talk about Marshall. We can talk about Malcolm X. But why are they going to, they're not going to see a connection. They'll understand it, but they won't personalize it. They look at, I want to be like Steph Curry. I want to be the next All-Star. I want to be like LeBron. I want to be like, the next hip-hop star. They want to be the next artist. They want to be the next app designer. If you can find stuff that relates to them on that level of people that you can see relevant to them, use it. Find the connection. Build that bridge. It's not easy, trust me. This took me, I've been doing this 12 years working in education. This will be my 3rd year in the classroom, or 2nd year technically in the classroom. And I'll be honest, it's gotten easier for me to pull the experience, but it's not as simple as I thought it was. And that's what makes it fun and challenging for me and for them. Because when I give it to, if I throw the ball to them all the time, I have no power in the classroom. But if I take it back and they start hearing me defend myself, like, oh yeah, I know about that. And they're like, oh, how do you know about that? And then I spit the knowledge back to them. And they didn't know I read Wikipedia at 7 o'clock in the morning that day. They don't know that I was watching YouTube videos the night before, doing my homework. But as a skilled researcher and historian that I am, I was like, all right, I gotta cheat the system. It's like getting the playbook ahead of schedule. If I grab the playbook, I can do this. And once they see it, they try to figure out ways to outsmart me. And that's the challenge. That's the game I like to play with them. Because if you outsmart me, I tell them, if you come to me with any argument and literally present me with any evidence, whether it be from the movies, from comic books, movies, whatever you can find, and defend it, I'll actually back down. Because you did something without me even wanting you to do it. I wanted you to go and do the research. I wanted you to actually, go in and understand the primary resource, secondary source, looking through what the good information was and is. And that's what we have to do. You have to get them to understand those skill sets. But when I step back, and they actually pull it up to me, and they're like, well, I found it here, and I have it typed here. And I'm like, well, okay, you guys win. And of course, I'll reward them with something. I have lots of friends that have always donated stuff to the classroom, or I bring stuff in, and they love it because they're seeing like, hey, I beat the teacher I beat him at his own game. So I have on the inside the actual document that you'll find in the PowerPoint presentation, it has my email. If you guys want any ideas on anything that you want to do in the classroom, if you need other topics or if you don't feel comfortable, like, hey, I don't know about Captain America or Spider-Man, could you tell me a little bit about it? I can find it for you. I don't mind. Also, I have a YouTube show, which I'll be putting this video link up there. And if you just have any questions just in general.